Peace and shalom, Israel. Before we start the lesson, hit the notification button because we upload lessons every week and I don't want you to miss a single one of them. Like, comment, subscribe, and if there's a topic you would like for us to cover, we'll see what we can do. So until next time, cue the music. All praises to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and peace to everyone joining us on this program. This is the Fountain of Israel's Bible Studies program, and as always, it's an honor for me to stand before you on the Lord's holy Sabbath day. However, this is not an ordinary Sabbath. This is indeed a day of memorial, a day of remembrance, a day of celebration, a day of feasting. This is the Feast of Weeks, of what we say in our modern day tongue, or in the Greek, Pentecost, which simply means 50. So this is the day 50 days after the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Pentecost. And we're going to look in the Bible at, like we do always when we are remembering these holy feast days of the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And what we do is we go all the way back. We go back to Leviticus, we go back to Exodus, we go back to Torah to give you the understanding of each of these feasts. So join me as we walk through the scriptures and we give you a little bit of understanding on what these feasts means and the significance thereof. So if you will, we will go to Leviticus momentarily, but let's go to Exodus 23 first, because we go to a couple of places here and there. So let's go to Exodus 23 first, just to shake things up a little bit. Every time we do these feasts, we usually start in Leviticus 23, which we will go there. But we're going to start in Exodus 23 first, just to show you guys these feasts there. So 23, starting at verse 14, 23 and 14, which reads, 3 times thou shalt keep a feast unto me in the year. Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I command thee, in the time appointed of the month of Abib, which is the first month for the Hebrew. And it happens in the spring on the modern Gregorian calendar, the March, April month, somewhere around there. For in it thou camest out of Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. Okay, so when you go to these feasts, when you guys assemble together, don't come empty. Okay, bring your offerings with you to help feed everyone at the feast. And the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labor, which thou hast sown in the field. So this is the feast of harvest, the feast of first fruit, the feast of weeks, Pentecost. All the same thing. They have different names, but it's the same thing. Again, the feast of harvest, the first fruit of thy labors, which thou hast sown in the field, and last but not least, and the feast of ingathering, or the feast of Sukkot, or the feast of tabernacles, which is in the end of the year, when thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field. Okay, that's what this is all about. All right, so we're going to go to Exodus 34. Exodus 34. And we will begin in verse 22, which reads, and thou shalt observe the feast of weeks, the first fruit of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. So I hope everybody understands, that these share, different names, same feast day, right? So again, it said, observe the feast of weeks, of the first fruits of wheat harvest. So the feast of weeks, the feast of harvest, and then of course ingathering is tabernacles. Thrice in the year shall all your men children appear before the Lord God, the God of Israel. For I will cast out the nations before thee, and enlarge thy borders. Thou shalt any man desire thy land, when thou shalt go up to appear before the Lord thy God thrice in the year. So 3 times a year, Israel will gather up and go to Jerusalem 3 times. All the men had to, okay? It was a requirement. Then obviously you have men that had families, and of course they, took their family with them. But the men, you had to appear before the Lord. You go up to Jerusalem, appear before the Lord, not empty, okay? 3 times a year, which was first fruits, unleavened bread, Feast of Tabernacles, all that, okay? So all those things had to All those three, we had to go and appear before the Lord. Now, we go to the chapter we normally go to when we are discussing feast days. Leviticus chapter 23. Leviticus chapter 23. Leviticus 23, I like to begin right there at the beginning. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feasts of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. So we all see who they belong to. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of rest and holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. Again, in all your dwellings. Remember, their first dwellings was in the wilderness for 40 years, right? So that was their first dwellings. So now we're going to continue to look. These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. Verse 5. In the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. Okay, so he starts with that. Okay, so he starts there in that spot right there. So it starts with the Passover. Now, after that, the very next one, okay, obviously you have unleavened bread as well because Passover kicks it off. But then after that, we go to the harvest or weeks or Pentecost. All right. So Deuteronomy 16, we're going to jump around a little bit. Deuteronomy 16, and let me start at verse 10, and we're going to jump around one more time. Okay. Verse 10, it says, And thou shalt keep the feast of weeks unto the Lord thy God, with the tribute of a freewill offering of thine hand, which thou shalt give unto the Lord thy God, according as the Lord thy God has blessed thee, according to how your increase. That's what the harvest is. So when he has blessed you or increased you, you're going to offer these things. That's why he's saying don't appear before him empty-handed. So you're going to offer those right back to him. Drop down to verse 16. So Deuteronomy 16:16, which reads, 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty. Again, every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord thy God, which he has given thee. Again, same thing, according to how he blessed you. So if he has increased you, you are to offer something back to him. Okay? You offer it back to him. Now, we're back to Leviticus 23, and I'm going to go to verse 9. Leviticus 23 and 9. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When you be come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the first fruit of your harvest unto the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord, to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. And ye shall offer that day when ye shall wave the sheaf and he lamb without blemish of the first year for a burnt offering unto the Lord. Okay. Again, in verse 12, and ye shall offer that day when ye wave the sheaf of the he lamb without blemish of the first year for a burnt offering unto the Lord. Okay, same thing. We see, you can see a picture right there, a Messiah. Verse 15, I'm dropping to 15. And ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that ye brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. So you're looking at 7 Sabbaths. So after unleavened bread, after Passover, unleavened bread, you start counting 7 Sabbaths. Okay, 7 Sabbaths. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall ye number 50 days, and ye shall offer a meat offering unto the Lord. So you're going to 50 days, okay, after the Sabbath, okay? Numbers 28. Let's go to Numbers 28 and look at some of this offering a little bit. Numbers 28. And verse 26 reads this. Also in the day of the first fruits, okay, so remember harvest, weeks, first fruits. Also in the day of the first fruits, when ye bring a meat offering unto the Lord, after your weeks be out, ye shall Ye shall have a holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work. Okay, so you take that day off. All right, so you have that. 27. But ye shall offer the burnt offering for sweet savor unto the Lord, 2 young bullocks, 1 ram, 7 lambs of the first year, and their meat offering of flour mingled with oil, 3/10 deal unto 1 bullock, 2/10 deal unto 1 ram, and 7/10 deal unto 1 lamb without the 7 lambs, and 1 kid of the goats to make an atonement for you. Verse 31, and ye shall offer them beside the continual burnt offerings and his meat offering. They shall be unto you without blemish, and their drink offerings. Okay, so now we have a little bit of an understanding there. Okay, so we just have, all we have to understand is just how we start to calculate that. Okay, so after Passover is over, after that's done, then you start marking the Sabbaths after that. 7 Sabbaths after that. So 7 Sabbaths, and then the day after. So 7 times 7 is 49 plus 1 day, 50. That's what Pentecost is. That's what Feast of Weeks is, okay? So we just marking 50 days, but it doesn't start until after Passover, okay? Then you start counting that. All right, so we're going to look at this one more time. Deuteronomy 16. Deuteronomy 16. This is what Israel was doing at the time, okay? This is what they were instructions. So this is our Torah portion. Deuteronomy 16 and verse 8 reads this way. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord thy God. Thou shalt do no work therein. 7 days shalt thou number unto thee. 7 weeks, Verse 9 says, 7 weeks shalt thou number unto thee. Begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the corn. When you start to harvest, when it's about time to harvest. And thou shalt keep the feast of weeks unto the Lord thy God with a tribute of a free offering of thy hand, which thou shalt give unto the Lord thy God according as the Lord thy God has blessed thee. Did you guys catch that? Okay, in verse 10, and thou shalt keep the feast of weeks unto the Lord thy God with the tribute of a free offering of thine hand, which thou shalt give unto the Lord thy God according as to the Lord thy God has blessed thee. Now verse 11. And thou shalt rejoice before the Lord thy God, thou and thy sons and thy daughter and thy manservant and thy maidservant and the Levite that is within thy gates. And who else? And the stranger and the fatherless and the widow and that are among you in the place which the Lord thy God has chosen to place his name there. Okay, so this is how it's a time of celebration. It's a time of rejoicing before the Lord, and you offer your offering unto him. What we do today, obviously we do this as a time of remembrance, as a memorial throughout our generations forever, to recount the events of the Lord taking Israel by the hand and escorting them out of Egypt by the hand of Moses, of course. In remembrance, even in our captivity, it does not hurt us to remember. We do all these feast days as a memorial of the events that transpired, also as a memorial of what is to come. That's why you are doing it. That is why each and every one of us are doing it, because we want to remember. We want to be counted in the number. We want to be a part of the harvest. So, verse 12, and thou shalt remember that thou was a bondman in Egypt, and thou shalt observe and do these statutes. Thou shalt observe the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days after that thou hast gathered in thy corn and thy wine. Okay, so it goes into the next, the next feast day there. So, all right, so now we're going to start going to the Brit Hadashah, or the New Testament, or the New Covenant, or the Renewed Covenant, Colossians chapter 2. All right, now let's look at this. Colossians chapter 2, verse 16. Colossians chapter 2, verse 16 says, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink, okay, meat offerings, drink offerings, or in respect of a holy day, seems to go together, or of the new moon, or of the Sabbath days, since you're doing it now, since I'm teaching you that, which are shadows of things to come, but the body is of Christ. Okay, so a lot of people want to twist that to make it seem as though Paul is saying, don't worry about that. Don't, you don't have to do it. And when someone else comes along, don't let them pressure you into keeping a holy day, a Sabbath day, a drink offering, meat offering. Don't let anybody bother you with that. That's how they read it. That's how they interpret it. But on the contrary, first and foremost, look who he's talking to. Okay, he's talking to the Colossians, which means they were not doing it before, and then he taught them to do it. And then he said, don't let anyone come along and tell you you don't have to do it. Because not everybody is willing to do this. As we saw, the stranger, bondwoman, manservant, maidservant, all that, strangers, widows, followers, everybody are to do these type of things. And keep in mind, they still had access to Jerusalem, meaning they could go there, they could get there. If you look at Pentecost, when we look at Acts, you had people from men from devout men all over the place. Okay, all out of all these different nations and regions and stuff, and they came to do Pentecost. Okay, because they knew. So you look at Colossians or whatever. This is a place or a people that Paul was instructing, and he was warning them that, hey, people are going to come against you. Look at us for example. Since you have been awakened, brothers and sisters, since you have been awakened, have you not come under fire? Have you not suffered persecution? Have you not had people give you sideways glances because of how you dress, or because you may have a particular garb on, or you have your head covering, or you eat a little different? Have you not? You want to blend in sometime, but we are peculiar people. But you're trying to blend in, you're like, oh, okay, you don't want to ruffle any feathers, you try not to offend, and yet it still comes upon you because you're going to be a set apart, different type of person. Scripture said so. So because you're going to do things a little bit different, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of a holy day or of the new moon or of Sabbaths. So you can allow them to trick you, okay, to deceive you and have you just ignore all of it. Don't worry about it. Just ignore it. And yet you have the Most High who will punish those who do indeed ignore it. Or the Messiah saying, I don't know you, ye workers of iniquity. So you can allow someone to trick you if you like. But let's see if he wants us to continue to do what we're doing. 1 Corinthians. Go to 1 Corinthians for me. Let's go to chapter 5, I should say. 1 Corinthians chapter 5. I just want to read verse 8 for you. This is Paul again. Therefore, let us keep the feast. Not with old leaven. We know we're talking about Passover and unleavened bread. Neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So let us keep the feast. So he just let us keep. He was doing it. We saw he was going up for Pentecost. We saw he, take Passover. We see right here talking about unleavened bread. Okay, we understand that. So it is that we are to keep these feasts. Now, if you don't keep it, that's fine, but you're going to do it consciously. You're not going to do it just, I didn't know. No, you know. 1 Peter chapter 1. 1 Peter chapter 1, and I will begin that one at verse 18. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 18. For as much as ye know that we were not redeemed with corruptible things, as silver and gold, for your vain conversation received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. Now, of course, we've seen this picture in the Old Testament because you had to offer a lamb without spot and without blemish. These sacrifices. Okay, there was various sacrifices out there, but we did see the picture of a sacrifice of a lamb, firstlings of the flock, without spot, without blemish. Okay. But with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. Okay, flawless, without sin. Okay, so Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26. So we're going to go back to work our way up. Okay, we'll go back towards Passover and work our way up to Pentecost. So from Passover to Pentecost. Verse 1 and 2, Matthew 26, verse 1 and 2, which reads, And it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, Ye know that after 2 days is the feast of Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. So he said after 2 days is the feast of the Passover. So again, they were observing the Passover, okay? They were observing the Passover. The Messiah and his disciples were observing the Passover, okay? Now, Matthew 28, 8. So we're going back to move forward. Matthew 28 verse 1. Matthew 28 verse 1. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. And for fear of him, that keepers did shake, and became as dead men. An angel answered and said unto the women, Fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Jesus, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where the Lord lay. Okay, so all this took place obviously after Passover, his death, crucifixion, all that. Okay, so they came, as it began to dawn towards after the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week. So that's when they came. Okay, so that on that particular Sunday morning, he was looking. He was already gone. They went to look for him, but he was already gone. Okay. So we're going to look at Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9. Verse 26 reads this way. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah, the Savior, be cut off. Means to be killed. Okay. The Messiah, the Savior, to be cut off. And let me look at this. I'm going to try to take a look at this in the Strong's real quick. That's at Daniel 9:26. Let me look at it in the Strong's. Daniel 9:26. Okay, so let me get this for us. Mashiach, okay? Anointed one, the Messiah, okay? King of Israel, Messianic priest, okay? Mashiach is anointed. Of the patriarchs as anointed kings, okay? So shall the Messiah, all right, shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince, they shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So all these things are coming in the end. A particular Messiah is going to be cut off, and not so long after, sacrifices and oblations will cease to be done, specifically in the temple in Jerusalem. And what do we have here, brothers and sisters? Do we offer sacrifices in the temple in Jerusalem right now? Are we giving it to a Levitical priesthood so they can offer these sacrifices? No, not happening. So something that the prophet Daniel has said rings true, does it not? He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifices and oblations to cease. Now, obviously, there's a duality. There's a double meaning there. Talking about a prophetic week, which is longer than an actual week or a literal week. And then we have the literal week where the Messiah got cut off in the middle of the week. So let's just keep that in mind. Let's go back to where we were. John chapter 20. John chapter 20, and I will begin at verse 11. John 20:11, which reads, But Mary stood without at the sepulchre weeping. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre, and see 2 angels in white sitting, the one at the head and the one at the feet, where the body of Jesus was laying. And they said unto her, Woman, why weepest thou? She said unto them, Because they have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. And when she had thus said, she turned herself back and saw Jesus standing, and knew not that it was Jesus. And Jesus said unto her, Woman, why weepest thou? Whom seekest thou? She, supposing him to be the gardener, said unto him, Sir, if thou have borne him hence, Tell me where thou hast laid him, and I will take him away. And Jesus said unto her, Mary. She turned herself and said unto him, Rabboni, which is to say, Master. Jesus said unto her, Touch me not, for I am not ascended to my Father. I want you guys to understand that I have not. So this wave offering, which the Levitical priesthood presented, okay, to the Lord, this wave offering, the sheaf offering of this first fruit, wave that to him to be accepted of the Most High, right? So he's saying, okay, and since he is the offering, okay, he said, I have not gone up to the Father just yet to present myself to see if I am an acceptable sacrifice. He hadn't done that yet. Okay, because he has to be presented without spot, without blemish. Mary, on the other hand, still being human, was still in her sin. I'm not saying she's a bad person or anything like that, but we can't say she is without spot, without blemish, right? So don't touch him just yet. Jesus said unto her, Touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father, but to go to my brethren and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene came and told her disciples that she had seen the Lord, and that he had spoken these things unto her. Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, then came Jesus and stood in the midst and said unto them, Peace be unto you. So, we see a clear picture now. See, we're moving towards Pentecost. Okay? We're moving towards Pentecost from Passover to Pentecost. We're moving in that direction, and we see how he had already been slain, been offered, and then at that point he hadn't gone to be ascended, but then he ascended, come back down, and then he was with the brethren. And we know he went up, came back down, because we can see later where Thomas was doubting and everything, and he said, Touch me, put your finger where the hole were, and all that stuff. See that I'm real, and now believe. Okay, that's when you get the doubting Thomas story. Okay, so now we know he was already accepted, and now he's back. Okay, and we're waiting for Pentecost. He is indeed our first fruit. Okay, and we're going to take a look at that. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And I'm going to start at verse 20, if you will. But now is Christ risen from the dead, and what? And become the first fruits of them that slept. The first fruits. See how we're transitioning? Okay, so he was our Passover. Behold, the Lamb of God. He was our Passover. And now he's fulfilling the first fruit. Okay? But now is Christ risen from the dead and become the first fruit of them that slept. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. Okay, so one man caused death, talking about Adam. And so now you're going to have by another man, talking about Christ, will come the resurrection of the dead. And then he explains it right here in verse 22. As for in Adam all die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. But every man in his own order. Christ the first fruit, afterward they that are in Christ at his coming. So we have to understand that he is our first fruit. Oh, he's the first fruit of many brethren, okay, that fell asleep. So he risen first, meaning he rose never to go down again. Because we've seen resurrections of people in the Bible, okay? I mean, one of the most famous ones, obviously, is Lazarus, right? But you can go in the Old Testament, you see Elijah, he's resurrecting someone, praying for them so that their life comes back to them. So it's not the first time you see a resurrection. You go Old Testament, New Testament, it doesn't matter. But this is one where he's to never die again. So when Christ rose, he just never went down, never die again. Okay, born or first fruit with immortality. That first fruit, that new body, this corrupted body will be sown into the ground, sown into the earth. Okay, will be buried or burned. Right, sown. That is that seed. And then at his coming, when he calls us out of it, because many are in the grave, sleep in the dust of the earth, will be called out of it and be brought forth. And then you will be a first fruit, a type of first fruit. That is the harvest. The laborers, the harvest is much and the laborers are few, kind of thing. So you're going to be a part of that harvest at his coming. And you want to be a part of that harvest at his coming, because it's going to be glorious. Again, this is a celebration. This is a celebration. So that we can all inherit, that we can all walk into the kingdom together as brethren with the chief shepherd. Do me a big favor and turn to Romans chapter 8, if you will. Romans chapter 8. I'm going to pick it up at verse 14. Romans 8 and 14, which reads, "For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. For you have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but ye have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself bear witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. If so be that we suffer with him, that we may also glorify together." We may also be glorified together, because we're all trying to get this resurrection, right? We're all trying to be part of this first fruit, this gathering, right? "For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us," this resurrection, this harvest. "For the earnest expectation of the creature waited for the manifestation of the sons of God," when we rise up out of that grave. "For the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who had subjected the same in hope. Because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. And not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits," again, look at what we have there. "And not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body," which is what we're waiting for, the redemption of our body. Now I'm going to drop down to verse 29, which reads, "For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that we might be the firstborn among many brethren." That we might be the firstborn among many brethren. This is what we're looking for, brothers and sisters. That we might be the firstborn among many brethren. So now we're going to go ahead and get to what we have in the New Testament in the book of Acts. This is what everyone goes to. And we're going to look at it. Okay? What everyone goes to. So we're going to look at Acts chapter 2. Okay? Let's look at Acts chapter 2. But we're going to read it now with understanding, because you have to have a backstory. You have to have an explanation for that which ye believe. So, let's look at it now. Obviously, this is well after Christ's resurrection and ascension. Now, Acts chapter 2 and verse 1, it says, "And when the day of Pentecost," let's look at this. Pentecost Day, okay? The second of the three great Jewish feasts celebrated at Jerusalem yearly, the seventh week after the Passover, in grateful recognition of the complete harvest. That's what the Strongs say when you look at Pentecost. It is the Greek 4005. Okay? Greek 4005. Okay. "And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Ghost, and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance." Now let's look at other tongues. So the tongues, glossa, the Greek, the tongue, a member of the body, organ of speech, the language or dialect used by a particular people distinct from that of other nations. Okay, so they begin to speak with other dialects and other languages as the Spirit gave them utterance. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded or confused, because that every man heard them speak in his own language. Look at it. There were devout men out of every nation under heaven. So they were confounded because that every man heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we were born? So if you think about it, you have a bunch of people together and they are hearing different languages. So one person is saying, hey, you know what? I hear them in Greek. Another person saying, no, they're not speaking Greek, they're speaking Italian. No, they're not speaking Italian, they're speaking Russian. Whatever the case may be. But everyone understands. In this moment, everyone understood what was being spoken. That's what the miracle is. It's the reverse of the Tower of Babel, which was meant for confusion. This one was meant for edification. You see the difference, the two. One was for confusion, Tower of Babel, and one is for edification, which is Pentecost. So all these little cloven tongues, fiery tongues, these little angelic tongues was translating as the disciples spoke. Are we getting the picture? Okay, verse 7 again. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we were born? Parthians and Medes and Elamites and the dwellers of Mesopotamia and Judea and Cappadocia and Pontus and Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia and Egypt, and in the parts of Libya about Cyrene, and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes, Cretes and Arabians. We do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of God. And they were all amazed and were in doubt, saying one to another, What meaning this? Like, what does this mean? Others mocking, saying, These men are full of new wine. But Peter, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said unto them, Ye men of Judea, and all ye that dwell at Jerusalem, be this known unto you, and hearken to my words. For these are not drunken, as ye suppose, seeing it is but the third hour of the day. But this is which was prophesied by the prophet Joel. And it shall come to pass in the last days, said God, I will pour out of my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And on my servants and on my handmaidens I will pour out in those days of my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show wonders in heaven above, the signs in the earth beneath, the blood and fire and vapors of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and shall moon into blood before that great and notable day of the Lord. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. And he continues, And ye men of Israel, hear these words, Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs, which God did by him in the midst of you, as ye yourselves also know. Him being delivered by the determined counsel and foreknowledge of God, ye have taken, and by wicked hands have crucified and slain, whom God has raised up, having loosed the pains of death, because it was not possible that he should be holden of it. For David speaking concerning him, I foreknew the Lord always before my face, for he is on my right hand, that I should not be moved. Therefore did my heart rejoice, and my tongue was glad. Moreover also my flesh shall rest in hope, because thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither will thou suffer thy Holy One to see corruption. Thou hast made known to me the ways of life. Thou shalt make me full of joy with thy countenance. Men and brethren, let me speak freely unto you of the patriarch David, that is both dead and buried, and his sepulchre is with us unto this day. Therefore, being a prophet, and knowing that God was sworn with an oath to him, that of the fruit of his loins, according to the flesh, he would raise up Christ to sit on his throne. He, seeing this before, spake of the resurrection of Christ, that his soul was not left in hell, neither his flesh did he see corruption. Because we know after 3 days, that's not long enough for a body to fully decompose. So he wasn't going to let it see corruption. And 32, this Jesus has God raised up, wherefore we are all witnesses. Therefore, being by the right hand of God exalted, and having received of the Father the promise of the Holy Ghost, he has shed forth this, which ye now see and hear. So he's going in, he's letting them know, okay, this is the person that David was talking about. This Christ, this Mashiach. This is who David was talking about. And David right now is still in the grave, but he's saying that Christ is at the right hand of God. So we have to understand, this is a day of celebration, brothers and sisters, a day of celebration, if we're ready to receive. Now, he did bring up Joel, so let's look at that, because Peter was saying, well, and this was prophesied in the prophet Joel. Okay, so let's take a look at this real quick. Joel chapter 2. Joel chapter 2. And when we get to Joel chapter 2, what I will begin at verse 28. And it shall come to pass afterwards that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. And I also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out my spirit. So Peter was quoting like pretty much verbatim. Okay. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood. Therefore, the great and terrible day of the Lord shall come, or the day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be the deliverance. And the Lord has said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. In the remnant. So the number, by comparison, won't be big. Okay, let's look at remnant. Joel chapter 2 and verse 32. So I want to look in the Strong's there. Joel 2:32. Let's look at, in the Hebrew, remnant, sarid, survivor, remnant, that which is left, survivor. Okay, and that is your Hebrew 8300. Hebrew 8300. Now let's go back. Okay, so that was Joel. Now we're going to start to transition a little bit, because we're still talking about the Feast of Weeks, but also a part of that is the year of recompense, or the year of Jubilee. Okay, the year of liberty and of freedom. We have to look at that. We want to pay attention to that. Isaiah 34. Isaiah 34. Because he's coming back for the remnant. Okay, because we see where the Messiah says over in Matthew. We see where the Messiah is saying, okay, they're entering at the straight gate, because that gate's narrow. But the gate of destruction is wide, because there's going to be more people on the path of destruction than on the path of righteousness. Because narrow is the gate, straight is the gate that leads to righteousness. Isaiah 34 verse 8, which reads, for it is the day of the Lord's vengeance and the year of recompenses for the controversy of Zion. Okay, the year of recompenses. We're gonna move towards that in just a second. We're gonna move towards Jubilee here in a second. But go to Isaiah 63 and verse 4. Isaiah 63 and verse 4. Isaiah 63 and 4, which reads, for the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. So these days are coming, okay? It is coming. Now, let's start winding it down. Matthew 24. Okay, let's read Matthew 24. We'll jump around a little bit, but let's look at Matthew 24. Okay, we'll start talking about end of days and things, but we're going to look at it a little bit, okay? We'll look at some signs and wonders and stuff. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? And Jesus said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. Look at what he starts. Deception. Verse 5. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars, and see that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. And when therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whosoever read it, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee unto the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of the house. Neither let him which is in the field return back and take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, to them which that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall great tribulation, such as was not since to the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days shall be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. So there's your remnant, what remains, okay? There's your remnant, okay? And I'm just going to drop down a little bit. And immediate to verse 29, Verse 29 of Matthew 24. Immediately after tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Let us continue. Matthew, because we're talking about a harvest. This is Pentecost. Matthew 13. Matthew 13, and I'm going to pick it up at verse 24. Matthew 13 and verse 24. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So you have the wheat and the tares. You have the goats and the lambs. Okay, you have the wicked and the righteous all coming up together. Just painting a picture here for you. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in the field? From whence then has it tares? So why are there tares there? And he said unto them, An enemy has done this. The servant said unto him, Will thou then that we go and gather them up? Do you want us to pluck them up? Do you want us to, take care of that? 29. But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, you root up also the wheat with them. Okay, so he didn't want them. So what's going to happen in this world? Verse 30. But, it says, let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. So if you look at the picture of like Left Behind that they say, look who's getting snatched up first. I want you to understand that. Verse 30, but let them both grow together until the harvest. So the wicked is going to be wicked and righteous together, which is all the more reasons why we have to let our light shine. All the more reason. All the more reasons why you have to be set apart and holy. All the more reason why you got to be peculiar so that you are not snatched up. Look at that. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers. Now, of course, we don't believe in a rapture, but let's look at this whole picture here. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares. So look who gets plucked up first, the tares. And bind them in the bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn, into the kingdom. Dropping down to verse 36. Then Jesus said unto the multitude and went into the house, and his disciples came unto him, saying, declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field. So he's going to go ahead and give you the interpretation thereof. So let's do that. And he answered and said unto them, he that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, gather into my barns. But the tares are the children of the wicked ones. And remember who got gathered up first. The enemy that sowed them in the field is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of this world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend. So that is a first cleanup act, okay? All that offend, and them that do iniquity. What? Wait. You have to absorb this. The Son of Man shall send his angels forth, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Verse 43. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who has ears to hear, let him hear. So we have the parable, and we also have him interpreting the parable for us. So you don't have to guess, you don't have to wonder, you don't have to scratch your head. You have it right before you. And it may not sound like it's a time for celebration, but it is. Why? Because if you have an ear to hear, then you hear what's going on. You have an understanding. You need to thank the Most High for that. Okay? You need to thank the Mighty One of Jacob for that. That now, I have an ear. I understand what is going on. I want to be a part of the plan, but I want to be a part of the good part of the plan. So when the reapers come and start snatching people away, it's not a rapture. It's house cleaning. So you do not want to be a part of that. When it is time to harvest, keep in mind, you do not want to be a part of the tares. Even though we dwell together somewhat. Because the wheat and the tares are coming up together, same time. Isaiah chapter 13. Isaiah chapter 13. Let me get a verse out of here, because now we're still talking about the weeks and Pentecost, and now we're going to talk about the year of Pentecost, year of recompense. Isaiah chapter 13. Let me just read verse 9. It says, behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. Again, the reapers are coming. The reapers are coming. The harvest is coming, and the reapers are coming to take the tares out first. Leviticus 25. Leviticus 25. And just look at one verse. Leviticus 25 and verse 13, which says, in the year of this Jubilee, ye shall return every man unto his possession. That means someone is going to get evicted. Because the meek shall inherit the earth, right? So he's going to come forth, okay? The Messiah comes forth, calls those that are his out of the grave, and gather them, give them a new body, give them a new identity. It's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. Everybody else is going to be ripped out of it, destroyed before the face of the earth, so he can give his remnant the kingdom. This is a time for rejoicing, brothers and sisters. This is a time for celebration. Why? Because you get to understand the plan of the Holy One of Israel. You get to understand the plan. You get to be a part of it. You get to, your mind is open. Your eyes are open now. And you have this new revelation of what this whole thing means. All these feast days have a very significant meaning. Some have been fulfilled. Some we are living in. And others are yet to be fulfilled. Like Tabernacles, that Day of Atonement. Tabernacles, the eighth day. We're not there yet. Right now, we are in a time of the Feast of Weeks. We're in a time of the Feast of Weeks, of the wheat and the tares coming up together. All you need to do is identify yourself. Whose team are you on? Are you one of his or not? That's all you have to do. Rejoice in that. Let's go to our last place so we can see how we're supposed to celebrate this feast. Okay? How do we look at this feast? How do we memorialize this feast? You know, this is, you have people out there who may say that, oh, well, we're not in Jerusalem. We don't have to do this. I've been saying throughout this entire lesson that we do it as a memorial. We do this in remembrance so that we can understand what we're dealing with, understand where they were and understand where we are now and understand where we're going later. That's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of this. So let's take a look at this. This is all for remembrance. And we celebrate this. Deuteronomy chapter 14. So we can see it, at least have a glimpse on how we keep the feast. Chapter 14, let's pick it up at verse 22, which reads, Deuteronomy 14:22. Thou shalt truly tithe all the increase of thy seed, that the field bringeth forth year by year. And thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose to place his name there. The tithe of thy corn, of thy wine, and of thy oil, and the firstlings of thy herds and of thy flocks, that thou mayest learn to fear the Lord thy God always. So we need to do this. Now let's say you're going to go gather with a congregation. 24. And if the way be too long for thee, so that thou art not able to carry it, all these offerings that you have, the corn, the wine, the oil, the firstlings of the flock, all that stuff. Or if the place be too far from thee, which the Lord thy God shall choose to set his name there, when the Lord thy God has blessed thee, okay, so this doesn't have to be in Jerusalem. He's just saying wherever, remember. Then shall thou turn it into money, and bind up the money in thy hand, and shall go unto the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And thou shalt bestow that money for whatever thy soul lusted after. This is a great feast and a celebration. For oxen, or for sheep, or for wine, or for strong drink, or for whatsoever thy soul desire, for whatever you want. And thou shalt eat there before the Lord thy God, and thou shalt rejoice, thou and thy household. Okay, and I'd like to touch briefly on when it says, for whatever you want, obviously within reason. You cannot have crab, shrimp. You can't have that. You can't have that which is abominable because it's not technically food. So whatever you want, food-wise, okay? or whatever thy soul desire, and thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God, and thou shalt rejoice, thou, you, and your household. So everybody's there, right? You and your household. That tells you everybody's there at the feast. Okay? So what you want to do also, so because a lot of people are like, well, I don't know how to do it. Okay, you can keep it at home. You can keep it, with you and your family to start with. Then, you find another family. You keep it you and another family. Then you keep growing from there. Or if you can make those arrangements, you come out to a particular community, okay, and celebrate with them. A lot of people make that pilgrimage and go to a community that's celebrated so that you can be around the brethren. Don't forsake the assembling of ourselves together. You can get recharged, renewed. You can have your spirit boosted and edified and lifted up by being around like-minded individuals, by being around other people who's trying to serve the Lord the way you are. It's going to be more than just you in the kingdom. Okay, there are other saints out there who are trying to strive to enter in, trying to be a part of this plan. Okay, so you gather together and you talk about those things that pertain to the Most High. That's what you do. You talk about those things and you build one another. You sing, you rejoice. Where's your music and merrymaking? Celebrate. Celebrate this. Because you're on the team. Celebrate this. Make this a wonderful, joyous occasion. Eat before the Lord. Build each other up. Sing praises unto Him. Play some music. Do something. Celebrate. Rejoice. The King is coming. This has been Pentecost, Shavuot, and I hope somebody's been edified in this lesson. I'll see you next time, Israel. Shalom.